Hello and welcome to my channel. If you've been here before, welcome back. My name is Alfonso Peluso and I'm a Studio Associate Professor in the College of Architecture at IIT, the home of the legendary Mies van der Rohe, which at the moment is actually closed due to the coronavirus pandemic. I hope everyone out there is staying sane and safe and healthy. Hopefully this video will help give you something to focus on, something to learn while we're all going through this together as a community. Today we're going to look at using Grasshopper to color meshes. So what is that? I have a colored mesh here on the screen, and this one is actually colored by surface normal. So as the direction of the surface normal changes, so does the color, and it gives it this really cool effect as you rotate this. And I'll show you this in a moment in an actual 3D print that my students have made. And a shout out to my IIT students who are going to be using this video during the pandemic to learn about mesh coloring. So this is part of our e-learning. Alright, before we jump into the tutorial, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, go ahead and subscribe. We have reached 5,000 subscribers and I'm super excited about that. So I'm looking forward to making it to 6,000 is my new goal. So if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and click on subscribe and click on the little bell to get all of the notifications. Also on Instagram, you guys have helped me reach 1,000 followers, so I'm super excited about that. Looking to make it to 2,000. Just before break at IIT, we had some midterms, and over at Columbia College, we also had some midterms. Those went really well. I'm actually missing my students at the moment. Look forward to seeing them again sometime soon. So here is a Instagram post where you can see some of my students' actual 3D prints. These were printed on a Z printer plaster 3D printer. It prints plaster and then it prints layers of plaster and layers of a binding agent, which is essentially a glue. But the head of the 3D printer can also print in full color. So you see some full color 3D prints here in these images. So we're going to look at how to make those in Rhino and Grasshopper. Alright, well let's jump into it. So here's our outline for today. We're going to look at a couple ways to convert surfaces to meshes. We're going to look at how to deconstruct the mesh and then reconstruct it by adding the color. And we'll look at a very simple technique to add color, which is just through a custom preview and a color swatch. We'll look at a mesh colors capsule. We'll look at applying color via the normals, which is what you see here on the screen. We'll look at a couple gradient color techniques. I have a bonus in here, which is the color wheel. As I was preparing for this tutorial, I came across the color wheel, so I want to show that to you. And then more of an old school technique, which is just in Rhino if you just want to apply a texture map to your mesh. Alright, so to begin with, surface to mesh, there's a couple different ways you can do that inside a Grasshopper. So when I say inside a Grasshopper, without the plugins, there's so many plugins out there now for working with meshes. But inside of Grasshopper, you have the mesh tab, and then under utilities, you have two that you can use. You have a mesh B-rep, so this converts a B-rep to a mesh. This one is not my favorite because it doesn't have a lot of settings. I mean, there are settings here, but I guess easily defined settings for the mesh. So that's mesh B-rep. The other one is mesh surface, which converts a surface to a mesh. And what I like about this one is you can actually control the quality of the mesh, the U and the V count of the mesh. So you have those two for you. Alright, let's go about coloring this mesh. So I'm going to get rid of the one that is in. Actually, I didn't bake it. Here's my definition down here. So let's just start this over. Okay, so I have a couple different meshes that I want to look at today. I turn that one on. There's this deformed icosahedron that we're going to be working with, and then there is something that was made in Kangaroo. Actually, this was made in Karumba, which is a finite element analysis form finding software, and it's showing you a stress gradient at the moment, that color. Okay, so let's go back to this icosahedron. Alright, so let's look at the very simple way to color this. So by using a custom preview and a color swatch. Now we're still going to have to deconstruct the mesh and construct the mesh, but just to show you what those capsules are. So custom preview is a capsule that I use a lot in my videos, and this will just take a geometry and apply a color to it. So that's a real simple way to do it, and my viewport is actually rendered right now, so that's why you're seeing the colors the way that you are. Let's take this off here. Okay, so just a little different way to see it based on your viewport settings. So I just want to make you aware of that. So let's just keep it at rendered. I think that'll work. I kind of like the rendered because it shows the actual mesh facets, which is pretty cool. Okay, so what can I do here? How can I change the color? Because it's this default Pepto-Bismol pink, and one of my students actually said that maybe Grasshopper used that color as a default because of how architecture students use building insulation, the rigid foam building insulation, a lot when they make their architectural models. I don't know if that's true. Maybe not. Alright, so let's add some colors to this. So we're going to do this using a color swatch. Now you may have noticed that David Rutten, the guy who wrote Grasshopper or writes Grasshopper, he uses the British English spelling for color. So just thought I'd point that out. Okay, so here we have our color swatch. So you can see that changes the color of the object based on what this is set to. And Grasshopper has a whole lot of ways to just create the color. It doesn't have to be a color swatch. So let's look at those. So I think with this one, if I use Control Alt, if I'm holding down my Control Alt key, I get the little eye symbol, and I click on that. So that's actually under Perimeter Color Swatch. You see Gradient is just below Color Swatch there as well. So those are a couple different ways to look at color. The Display tab has a lot more options there, and we're going to look at some of these, or at least one bonus one down the road a little bit. Okay, so this is just, the whole mesh is just one color. So let's look at changing that. So I'm going to get rid of my custom preview, and I am going to deconstruct the mesh. Okay. And I am going to reconstruct the mesh, or construct the mesh. Oh, missing that S in there. Okay, so construct mesh. Okay, so for that, what this is giving me is it's giving me an input for colors. So that's the reason that I'm doing this, is I now have an input where I can control the color. So I'm going to plug the vertices and the faces back in. Okay, I'm going to turn the preview off. Let's see if I remember the shortcut. It's been a while. Yeah, Control Q. Control Q, or you could right click and turn preview off. So Control Q turns the preview off for that. Okay, so now the colors, I can plug this in. Okay, and that's being applied very similarly to what we had before to the entire mesh. But let's look at how we can take this and we can copy paste this, and we can change the color of it. Okay, I'm going to plug that in with the shift key. Okay, so now it's starting to create a repeating pattern of color on the actual mesh faces. So let's add a few more of these, copy and paste these. Change the color. Let's give that some saturation. Alright, let's plug that in. Alright, so we're getting this really funky pattern on there. So again, this is a repeating pattern of color. Let's do one more. Alright. It's kind of cool to plug it in ahead of time so you know what you're getting before you're done. Alright, so I think you get that. Now there is another way to do this. We can do this through this capsule, mesh colors. So let's take a look at that. Mesh colors. Where you hiding? There you are. Mesh colors. Alright, so now this one has some built-in colors. Okay, and you see those as I'm hovering over the colors input. There's 8 locally defined values. So let's just look at that. So we're going to be using this construct mesh a little bit later. So let's just go ahead and turn the preview off for that. Okay, so this mesh colors. Let's go ahead and move this down, just keep things a little bit more organized. Alright, so I'm going to jump this over directly into it. Okay, so similar to what we were doing. Here's the difference here. So we have that and we have that. Similar way. And for those of you who don't know, I'm using this half green, half white cylinder, which only previews the selected capsule. Find that very helpful. Okay, so this has some default colors in it. You can right click on that. You can go down to, let's see, manage color correction. Yeah, manage color collection, and you can add. I can click on add an item. I can go in here and select my color, and different options: custom, you have web, you have system. Let's check out web. Let's go with fuchsia. So we're adding fuchsia now. So we're adding a 9th color because it starts at 0. Okay, so we've added fuchsia in there. So that is another way to do it. Okay, the way that I did it, or the way that it was shown when I started the video, was through the normals colors, which creates a great result. You have less control over it though. If you're looking at a color strategy, which my students are looking at creating a color strategy for their meshes, that one creates beautiful results using normals color, but it's kind of a one and done. So let's take a look at that. So now you can also plug custom color swatches into this if you don't want to set it the way that I just showed you. We could take these here. I wonder if I could just add. That doesn't like that. Okay, so cleared out what I had before, but now it's using these as well. So you can do that directly through mesh colors versus doing a deconstruct and a construct. So you have that option as well. Okay, so let's get rid of that. Okay, let's get rid of these. Okay, so let's turn that one back on. Control Q, does it work? Yeah. Alright. So, colors. Okay, we still have this colors input here. We're going to plug our normals directly into that. Oh, it's a thing of beauty, isn't it? So we can see that. That's a quick and easy one. One and done. No custom custability. Is that a word? I don't think so. But I don't know. Maybe there isn't. Maybe there's a way to do it. I just don't know about it. And I've been learning a lot from you guys as well when I make these videos. So if you have a way to customize the colors that are being input for the normals, let me know in the comments down below. That would be great to know. Now, let's look at this with this other mesh that I have, because that one is really cool too. Okay, so this was a mesh. If you want to know how I made this mesh, I have a video that uses Weaverbird. Okay, so it's not quite how I got to the form finding, so it doesn't cover the Carumba version, Carumba steps I should say, but it covers using Weaverbird to make this really cool surface. Now look at that as I rotate it. That is really a thing of beauty right there. And when you 3D print this on a Z printer, which is a full color printer, and you have this object in your hand and you rotate it around, the effect that it creates is just really awesome. Okay. Alright, so let's go back to our icosahedron. Okay, so we've looked at normal colors. Let's look at some gradient color techniques. Okay, so let's bring out the gradient color capsule. Okay, and you can use Control and Alt and click on that so you see where that is. Okay, so gradient color capsules are a little bit of a challenge to use in Grasshopper just to understand what's happening there. Okay, so let's take a look at this a little closer. So let's just plug it in. So, you know, my background, using a lot of Photoshop gradients and textures, I'm hoping that I could just plug this in and it's just going to give me this perfect foreground to background gradient, you know, light red to dark red. Just plug that in and nope, that's not what I'm getting. Alright, so the capsule's orange, it means it needs some information. So let's give it some. So let's give it a parameter, which is a number between 0 and 1 if that is my lower limit of the gradient, which it is by default, and my upper limit is 1, so between 0 and 1. So let's say I put in 0.3, just double clicking, typing 0.3. So what it's doing is it's just assigning a color to the entire mesh based between 0 and 1. So from the beginning of the gradient to the end of the gradient. So 0 is the light part of the gradient and 1 is the dark part of the gradient. Now in this case it's going to be better talking about this to actually see the mesh edges in Rhino. So in Grasshopper, if I go to display and I go to preview mesh edges, or Control M is the shortcut. Okay, so now we have something a little bit more substantial to look at. Alright, so let's look at how we could use this gradient tool to color the mesh based on the direction, like the X direction. So we can have the gradient go from light to dark along the X direction, or we can have the gradient go from light to dark in the Y direction and in the Z direction. Alright, so do we want to change this? I don't love this red gradient color. So I'm going to right click on this little color wheel in the upper left here, and I'm going to go down to the presets. Let's keep it real colorful today. Alright, so there's our black and white. Alright, let's use this just to at least talk about it a little bit. Okay. Alright, let's go for this. Let's get rid of this parameter setting that's in here now. Alright, so we have our deconstruct mesh. What we're going to do is we're going to take the vertices and we're going to use a deconstruct point. Okay, so here's our deconstruct point, which is just deconstruct. Okay, so do I want to take out the construct mesh for the moment just to look at this? Yeah, let's do that. Alright, so what's coming out of the deconstruct mesh vertices? So a whole bunch of XYZ values. They're points. That's what's coming out of the vertices. And we can look at that if I put them, let's put it in a points, let's put it in a point container. Okay, so there you see all those points. Alright, so if I plug this into my deconstruct, what I'm getting is I'm getting all the X values in one output, all the Y values in another output, and all the Z values in the third output. Alright, so we can use these to actually color the mesh. So let's do it. Alright, let's turn off this point capsule, Control Q, and what we're going to need is we're going to need a minimum and maximum. We'll do this. Let's do this for the Z. So we need a minimum and maximum for the Z. So because you see this list is not organized by minimum and maximum. So to organize the list from minimum to maximum, we're going to use a bounds capsule. So there's our min-max bounds. I'm going to plug that into the Z. Okay, so now we can use this to construct our domain. So that's what the lower limit and the upper limit is. That's actually a domain. So we're going to use our construct domain. Okay, so now our bounds, let's see here, construct. Alright, it's not the bounds that I'm looking for because, okay, this is construct domain. Let's see, yeah, we need so we have our deconstruct domain. Okay, there we go. I was looking at this capsule construct domain and I'm like, well, I need a start and an end, and that doesn't give me a start and an end. So for that, I'm using my deconstruct domain. Okay, so that's giving me a start and an end, and my start can go into my lower limit and my end can go into my upper limit. Okay, so now for the parameter, we are going to plug the Z into that as well. So let's get this so it doesn't cross. Alright, so to see the color in this, we are going to bring back our construct mesh. Okay, so let's bring this over here for a moment. Alright, so we're going to plug our vertices back in, plug our faces in. Okay. And I hate when the wires cross behind for you guys. Alright. So these are going to be our colors. Alright, so bear with me while I try to organize this a little bit better. Alright, success. No wires crossing. Alright, so here you see the gradient going from light to dark. Okay, you could, if you wanted to go in the other direction, you could do a reverse list, I'm sure. Some crafty way to reverse that. Alright, so now should we put some color back into this thing? Right click on that, go to presets. Alright, let's try that one. Alright, so there you go. You can see this going. And you can see the direction of it. So that's in the Z direction. And easy enough. Oh, I do have wires crossing, right? Easy enough to change the direction of it. Okay, so if I want that to go in the X direction, I just need to switch both of these. So this X is going to go in here, and you can see you could use some combinations of things if you find that helpful as a color strategy. So, and the X can go into there. So now it's just following. I'm not sure which direction is X, but it actually, you know, in this looking down and plan, the color strategy or the color gradient direction looks just like the color gradient capsule and Grasshopper. Y, I'm guessing it's going to go, I hope, from here to here. So let's just take a look. So plug that in and plug that in. Oh, not quite, not quite. Oh, because I used Z. Alright. It's actually going in this, yeah, from here to here, the vertical direction. Alright, so that, if you're looking to do a gradient, that's going to help. Alright, so this bonus, this color wheel, which I thought was really cool. Let's take a look at that. I think I did that with just a mesh colors, so we get to reintroduce that back in. So let's turn all this off. Control Q, I notice it doesn't work well if there's a mixture of capsules that are on and off. So if I'm selecting all of this and I want to turn it off, I'm just right clicking in the canvas and choosing preview off. Okay, so let's go back to, we just have a mesh. Let's use mesh colors. Let's go ahead and plug that in. Okay. So we can, as we saw before, we could override this colors input. So we're going to use the color wheel. Now, where is the color wheel? So let's type it in the British English way. So COLOUR. There it is, color wheel. Alright. So I'm going to plug this in. Okay, so it needs an input. So what it's looking for, and I thought this was really cool, I love stumbling upon these things. So it's looking for an input that consists of how many colors to generate in a single palette, which is pretty much what we've been doing. We've been assigning multiple colors to color the mesh. So let's say that, and this is cool because we can use a number slider that makes it parametric. So let's say I type in, double click and type in 6. So that gives me a number slider from 0 to 10. Alright, so right there we're getting 6 colors, and if I want less, I can have less, or if I want more, I can have more. Okay, so now let's look at the color wheel, what we can do here. So there's a luminosity, which is how light or dark to make it. And then there's our saturation, how much color, how little color we want. So we have that to work with. Let's spin the wheel a little bit. Oh yeah, look at that. There we go. That's oddly satisfying right there. Alright, so that's the color wheel. Alright, our last way to do this is via a texture map. Okay, so let's do that. So to apply a texture map, we're gonna actually bake it. We're gonna bake it and just apply that texture map the old school way in Rhino. So which one are we gonna bake? Let's go. I really want to bake. I want to bake one with the normals because it's just so awesome. All right, so let's see if I can do this. Let's go over here. Let's turn this one off. Let's turn this one back on. Okay, so there's that one I want to bake. So I'm going to go in here and right click on the mesh output and I'm going to choose bake. Just going to bake it to the default layer. Alright, is it in there? It's in Rhino. So now I'm going to save this and close this. Oh, you were there. Alright, let's see. You're still there. Alright. For some reason you weren't showing up rendered, but you're showing up shaded. So I'm glad we're seeing some of that. Alright, so it wasn't showing up rendered, but it's showing up shaded. Okay, but it was showing up rendered at the beginning of the tutorial. Alright, so let's take a look at this. So we're going to just assign a texture map to it, and we're going to do that by object. Okay, so let's look at this. Looks like there's already a material on here. Alright, so that was from when I was prepping this. So typically, if you're in Rhino 6, you're going to see a plaster material. That's going to be your default material. Okay, so let's select that. Alright, I was getting a warning there. You might have saw that. Alright, so default material here, I'm going to click on that. We're going to change that to be a custom material. And in this custom material, we're going to apply a texture map. So I'm just clicking to the right of color, and I'm going down to assign texture. And I was going to ask in the comments if you could guess the texture, but I guess I just gave it away, so that's not going to work. So it's Van Gogh's Starry Night. Okay, so when we click OK, alright, so now we got to get this thing to show up. Alright, so of course, right? Let's see something. I know I need to apply a texture map coordinate to this, and we're going to get there in a second. But what happens when I render this? Well, of course, I'm using V-Ray, so I want to change my render to Rhino render. Alright, so that has the normals color on it, and it's not using the Starry Night texture. Alright, so what happens if I go to properties and I let's place a spherical mapping on it. Okay, I'll just start that from what I think is about the center of it, and I'm just going to make a large sphere. Okay, so there's my sphere map. Alright, so it's still not showing up in either case. So what I'm going to do, so here we go, live troubleshooting in the video. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do is I'm going to bake this mesh without the colors on it, although it did work before, but let's see what happens. So I'm going to delete that, go back to Grasshopper, and now this original mesh, just wondering if that's already colored. Okay, so that has some colors on it, but what the heck, let's bake it. Let's Let's make it to a different layer this time. Okay. Let's go through those steps again. So we'll look at the material. We're going to apply a custom material to it. We're going to assign a texture, which is Starry Night. We'll click OK. Let's change this to rendered. Okay. So there we go, some live troubleshooting. All right. So let's look at how to change the texture map properties of this. So I have the object selected. I'm going to properties, and we're going to look at applying the spherical mapping. All right, so properties. Oh, it wants me to draw it. So let's do that again. Let's draw it from about the center. Okay, so let's deselect that. So different ways to apply this. Now if I select it, I can change that from spherical, I can change it to box. So you have different options. And then you also have options for the size, as well as the type of mapping. Let's try cylindrical. Okay, so I think also applying texture maps and letting the Z printer print those could be pretty interesting as well. All right, let's bring Grasshopper back up. All right, so hopefully you guys found this tutorial helpful. If you did, go ahead and click on the likes below. Leave me some comments. Let me know what you think. And stay safe, stay healthy out there, and we'll see you on the next video.